Ariana Whitmore had lived a life most people only saw in glossy magazines and elite social media feeds. As the only child of Richard Whitmore, the powerful and enigmatic CEO of Whitmore Dynamics, she had grown up in the lap of luxury, private jets, diamond-encrusted everything, sprawling estates in 3 countries, and access to the world's most prestigious events. But despite the lavishness, Ariana always felt a quiet emptiness inside, a loneliness that not even the world's finest things could fill. Her mother, Elena, had been her emotional anchor until her sudden death in a private jet crash when Ariana was just 12. From that day forward, her world shifted, becoming colder, more controlled. Her father, though never warm, turned obsessively protective and strict. Her days were micromanaged, her future predetermined. Obedience was expected. Questions were discouraged. Now 23, Ariana had returned from Harvard with a degree in international business and a heavy heart, though she was expected to join the executive board of Whitmore Dynamics. She wasn't sure she wanted to spend her life being a pawn in her father's empire. Still, she agreed to help prepare for a presentation tied to the Whitmore Foundation's annual gala, a gesture meant to show the company's humanitarian side. While working late in the foundation's office, she logged into the secure network, using access granted through her father's executive assistant. A folder labeled WDF Accounts, Legacy, caught her eye. Curious, she clicked. The folder wasn't what she expected. Instead of tax returns or donation records, she found a string of encrypted emails, offshore payment receipts, and private communications that detailed a horrifying trail. Her father had funneled millions into shell companies, paid off government officials, and even sabotaged rival startups through hacking and false accusations. But what truly made her blood run cold was an email chain labeled EW Contingency. EW stood for Elena Whitmore, her mother. The emails discussed her mother's suspicions about company fraud and referenced a safety risk if she decided to go public. The final message simply read, "Ensure the plane is clean. No trace back to Whitmore." Ariana's heart slammed in her chest. The jet crash had always seemed suspicious, but it had been ruled a tragic accident. She had grieved believing fate had taken her mother, not her own father's greed and fear. Her vision blurred with tears as the truth settled like lead in her stomach. Her entire life had been built on lies. Lies her father constructed to protect his empire. Everything, his reputation, their family's wealth, their status, had been bought with silence and blood. Ariana backed away from the desk, trembling. She wanted to scream, to cry, to confront him, but she knew she had to be smart. One wrong move could put her in danger. As the echoes of her father's laughter drifted down the hallway from a phone call upstairs, Ariana stared blankly at the screen, a storm of betrayal rising inside her. She wasn't sure what she would do yet, but one thing was certain: her life would never be the same again. The next morning, Ariana woke with a heaviness that didn't lift, even beneath her satin sheets and the golden morning light flooding through the penthouse windows. Her body lay still, but her mind raced. The images from the night before haunted her. Offshore accounts, shadowy payments, and that cold, calculated message about her mother's plane. A lie had been fed to her for over a decade. One she'd mourned under, one that had shaped every decision she made. Her father hadn't just betrayed her mother. He had stolen her life, then wrapped it in silk and pretended it never happened. Ariana's chest ached with a grief that was now laced with rage. She couldn't let this go. She couldn't pretend everything was okay, but she also knew she couldn't face Richard Whitmore head on. Not yet. Her father was powerful, connected, and ruthless. If he was capable of orchestrating a murder and covering it up with such precision, then she couldn't risk tipping him off until she had proof, until she knew what to do. For now, she'd play her part. The obedient daughter, the poised heiress, the perfect cover. But behind the curtain, she was already laying the groundwork, using a separate phone and funds from a secret trust her mother had set up for her years ago. Ariana hired a private investigative firm under a false name. Discreet, highly rated, and known for digging into corporate corruption, they agreed to take the case. In less than 2 weeks, They returned with findings that sent chills down her spine. Her father's criminal activities stretched back over 20 years. He had bribed government officials, orchestrated cyber attacks on rival companies, and used blackmail to secure government contracts. Several promising startups had mysteriously collapsed after rejecting his acquisition offers. And then there were the testimonies: former employees, business partners, and one terrified woman who had once worked in Richard's inner circle. Her story matched Ariana's fear. Ariana Whitmore had uncovered incriminating data shortly before her fatal crash. She had planned to go to the press. But before she could act, her plane lost communication mid-air and went down over the Atlantic. Ariana broke down in the privacy of her room that night. Her mother had tried to do the right thing, and it had cost her everything. Ariana felt the weight of that legacy pressing down on her shoulders. She was the only one left who knew the truth, and who had the means to do something about it. She couldn't undo the past, but she could make sure her father's sins were no longer hidden beneath gold and gloss. Quietly, she began gathering everything: documents, testimony, recordings, and storing them in encrypted files. The world still saw Ariana Whitmore as the pampered daughter of a tech titan. But behind her carefully curated image, a storm was brewing. She wasn't just seeking justice for her mother. She was planning to expose everything. Richard Whitmore had built his empire through lies and blood, and now, his own daughter was going to bring it crashing down. Ariana vanished from the public eye, just as quietly as she had lived in it. Her sudden disappearance from charity events, fashion weeks, and corporate galas sparked rumors of a mental breakdown or secret romance. But Ariana had no time for rumors. She was deep in preparation, operating from a modest rented apartment under an alias. Her makeup-free face, tucked under a hoodie, would have gone unrecognized by even her closest friends. She'd traded pearls for passwords, red carpets for encrypted drives. Every day she worked in silence, sifting through data, connecting with former employees, building a network of allies who also wanted justice. She wasn't just trying to destroy her father's legacy. She wanted to expose a system that allowed men like him to thrive in the shadows. She created a covert whistleblower platform called Nova Justice, using blockchain encryption and VPN layers that made it virtually untraceable. Through this digital fortress, she released the first wave of files, falsified environmental reports, internal memos about unethical experiments, and offshore transactions that pointed to money laundering. The documents spread like wildfire. Journalists, activists, and independent investigators pounced on the leaks. News outlets questioned the morality of Whitmore dynamics. Reddit forums blew up with theories. Some employees anonymously confirmed the documents. A few even came forward on live TV. It was the first crack in Richard Whitmore's carefully curated empire. The media frenzy didn't name her yet, but Richard was panicking. Board meetings turned hostile. Shareholders demanded answers. He blamed hackers, rogue employees, foreign attacks, anything but himself. Ariana watched all this unfold from her safe house, each headline a small victory. But she knew her father would grow desperate, and desperate men made dangerous moves. Soon, she felt the heat. A man in a dark suit began appearing near her apartment. Her phone buzzed with strange, silent calls. Her secure accounts were probed for weaknesses. Her father was hunting her. But she stayed one step ahead. Thanks to the private security team she hired under a separate identity, men who had once served in intelligence agencies and owed no allegiance to the Whitmore name. Despite the danger, Ariana pressed forward. She personally met with victims, small business owners ruined by Richard's sabotage, whistleblowers silenced with threats, and engineers whose ideas were stolen. She offered them legal support, financial aid, and, most importantly, hope. For the first time, people saw her not as a billionaire's daughter, but as a force of justice. Still, she knew that real justice would require more than leaks. The truth had to be undeniable, on record, and impossible to bury. Her next move would be the most dangerous of all. She would step into the light. Ariana was done hiding. The morning sky was overcast, a thick gray blanket stretching over New York City, as if even the heavens held their breath. Reporters lined the entrance of the Ariana Whitmore Center, a small, underfunded charity her mother had founded years ago, one her father had ignored, but Ariana had secretly kept alive. For months, she had worked in silence, but now, it was time to reveal the truth. Wearing a modest black blazer and no jewelry, Ariana stood at the podium before a sea of flashing cameras and microphones. The room was silent until she spoke, and when she did, her voice was steady, clear, and piercing. "My name is Ariana Reyes," she began, using her mother's maiden name for the first time. "You know me as the daughter of Richard Whitmore. But today, I stand not as his heiress, but as a witness and a whistleblower." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Journalists leaned forward. Ariana unfolded her story. How she uncovered the crimes buried in company archives. How her mother had tried to expose the truth and died because of it. And how Ariana had spent the last year building Nova Justice to dismantle the empire of lies her father created. With calm precision, she laid out the evidence: stolen technologies, rigged contracts, suppressed innovation, and lives destroyed by Richard's insatiable hunger for power. Then came the most damning revelation of all: the email implying he had ordered the death of Ariana Whitmore to silence her forever. Her voice cracked only once, when she spoke of her mother's gentle spirit and the day she sat alone at a funeral, not knowing she was mourning a murder. But she quickly regained her composure. "My father built his empire by erasing people," she said. "But I will not be erased. My mother will not be erased. The truth will not be erased." Within hours, the press conference went viral. The Department of Justice released a statement confirming a federal investigation. Stock in Whitmore dynamics plummeted. Board members resigned. Former allies turned their backs on Richard, now branded a corporate criminal and suspected murderer. That evening, the FBI raided the company's headquarters. And as Richard Whitmore was led out in handcuffs, a single reporter asked, "What do you have to say about your daughter?" He didn't answer. His face was pale, his empire crumbling. Ariana, however, didn't celebrate. Instead, she announced the full dissolution of her inheritance. Every cent was transferred to the Ariana Whitmore Foundation, now rebranded as a global non-profit for whistleblower protection and justice reform. Ariana chose a small apartment, continued working anonymously with Nova Justice, and never looked back. The world had expected her to inherit power and continue the dynasty. Instead, she destroyed it. Not out of hatred, but because truth demanded it. Ariana had turned against everything she was born into, and in doing so, she didn't just change the legacy of one man, she rewrote her own. And the world would never forget her name,